Hey everyone, it's Neb. Today is September 25th, 2025, and it's 2:20 p.m. in my local time. I wanted to tell you all about an upcoming fight night this Sunday that will be testing these highly experimental changes known as the tech split. It's going to be a lot of fun. The tech split rebalances the tech tree in bar. The impacts are pretty broad, but what I'm most excited for with Fight Night is how it can impact 1v1. So we'll be having this 1v1 experimental test night for Fight Night this Sunday. Please join us if you would like to try these changes out. It's 1v1 Swiss format, which means that no matter your skill level, you will play in every round. And as the rounds progresses, you'll play more balanced matches. And by the end, you should generally have a very competitive, very fun match, no matter your skill level. So please join us if you would like to try these changes out. It's going to be a lot of fun, and all the details will be posted in the description below. Today I wanted to show you all the tech split that I've been working on with Robert82 and Ragna. We've been working on this for a couple months now, working on basically addressing the problem that a lot of new players experience with teching, especially like transitioning to T2. I'm sure many of you have experienced what it's like to try to play against a player who got T2 much before you did. And we kind of just want to look at essentially the balance between T1, T2, T3, look at the tech tree, rearrange some things and change some unit stats around to have some better interaction between T1, T2, and T3, while also making teching itself more accessible. The goal of this at the end of the project, we hope that teching will be essentially a lot easier for anyone to do, but then the skill curve from teching comes more from choosing units. How do you use those higher tech units correctly? So we really want to lower the barrier to teching and make it more fun and rewarding to actually learn the higher tech instead of having all this frustration around learning actually like how to get to that tech level. So without further ado, I just want to dive into these changes. As you can see in front of me, there's a couple new labs here. They're mostly honestly placeholder labs for now, but we've essentially rearranged how the tech tree works. So right away, you'll notice from the commander, there's no longer the option for hovers. I know many of you might miss this, but don't worry, we give you plenty of other tactical options to make up for losing the hover lab. So now you'll just see 4 labs which represent the 4 different branches of tech. You have your bot lab, vehicle plant, aircraft plant, and shipyard. These labs cost around 400 to 600 metal, give or take. So the bot lab itself is like 500 metal. The aircraft plant in T1 is 710 metal right now, so pretty expensive. And then between that, you have the vehicle plant, and the cheapest lab is your shipyard, which is around 450 metal for Armada, of course, and it'll be different for Cortex, but generally same ballpark. From there, you have 4 T2 labs, technically 5, because there is the seaplane lab as well. So there's the underwater variant of the advanced aircraft plant now. As you can see, seaplanes are now T2 along with the T1 heavy transport. Additionally, hovercraft are now in the T2 vehicle plant, the advanced vehicle plant, as well as the advanced shipyard, the T2 shipyard. You can see there's amphibious options here as well. So both T2C and T2 vehicles get access to hovers. Finally, you have your advanced bot lab. And you will notice that the T2 labs now are also missing some of the heavy T2 options that are present in vanilla. And that's because many of these units have been now moved to the new T3 labs. So we have 4 experimental labs. In addition to the experimental gantry with your classic experimental units, this is unchanged. But your T2 labs cost around 1600 metal, give or take. The T2 shipyard is a little more expensive just to keep the balance there with C. It's 2300 metal, that's your most expensive T2 lab, and the rest are around 1600 metal, give or take. Moving up to the T3 labs, these are around 4800 metal, give or take. The T3 shipyard is a little cheaper, it's only 3800 metal, just to again keep that C balance. But as you can see, the aircraft plant, both underwater and the land variants for T2 cost the same. They're essentially identical, but this just gives C maps some air options. Your T3 labs, around 4800 metal. These give you options to some heavier units, longer range units, and also some light, what in vanilla are your light experimental units. So you have like T3 Raiders. Additionally, T2 Air has become T3 Air. And what's really nice is if you look at all of these rosters, they only take up 1 page for every lab. So there's no more like hidden units. Units should have a little bit more room to breathe as rosters aren't cluttered anymore. And most importantly, T2 is easier to access, but it doesn't give you access anymore to the most oppressive T2 units in base game, like your Fat Boy or your Czar, that sort of thing. Another important change is that mobile jammers have been moved to T3, and these now also provide some radar. Additionally, T3 gives you access to the T3 radar and jammer combo, which is essentially we're using pinpointers. Also, combat engineers are now your experimental constructors, and they've been replaced in the T2 lab by other options such as the construction hovercraft for T2 vehicles and T2C, or you have your Weber and Commando for Cortex. So as you can see, Cortex follows the same simple tech tree. You have 4 branches of tech, and they all converge on the experimental gantry. Some T2 options have been moved to T3, and seaplanes are now your T2 Air with the heavy transport, and hovers are now in T2 labs. And after this, I will cover some of the more, go into more depth onto specific unit changes that we also included with the tech split. So, part of our work with designing the tech split revolved around how do we make sure that rosters for all of the different labs still felt like complete rosters, even while we're moving units around and maybe taking away some options. And part of this also, as we saw with rosters that are a little more concise, is that units all have a lot more space to fill specific niches. And we wanted to make sure that as you move up in tech, units got stronger strengths, but they also had more obvious weaknesses that could be exploited and that allow for some interaction between the tiers. And so we have a set of unit changes that go along with the tier split that I want to cover. So first, we're going to look at Armada bots. From the Armada bot lab, we haven't moved any units around, but we do have 2 units that we've changed in this lab. The Centurion, we've wanted to make sure that the Centurion can fill the assault role really well, and make sure that the Centurion kind of provides an option against light, fast raiders, because especially in 1v1s, we're seeing a lot of games where raiders kind of dominate, and there aren't many good options to deal with them in T1. So we have the Centurion anti-swarm bot. We gave it a little bit more speed. It now has 56 speed, and to compensate, we reduce its range greatly. And its range is so short now that they're very vulnerable to Commander D guns. But with careful micro, you can still duel commanders with them and deal lots of damage. We also have changed rocket bots. We've given them quite a bit more range, and to compensate, we've lowered their speed, lowered their fire rate a little bit. This allows them to be more competitive even with some T2 units, as their range, they now outrange a couple T2 units. And essentially, it's the same idea with the Centurion. These two T1 units now are a little bit better equipped to deal with T2 units in specific scenarios. So your rocket bots are a good skirmisher. They can deal with like slower T2 units. They can deal with T2 units that have a little bit more range, such as like Hounds, Sheldons even. They can duel with Sheldons. But they're still very fragile and vulnerable to fast units, especially like fast T2. If you see rocket bots, you basically want to be rushing them with fast units. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have Centurions, which are vulnerable to a unit with range, like a rocket bot, but they're really good at dealing with short range, light, fast units with high damage. So that's your T1 bot lab for Armada. In your T2 bot lab for Armada, we have changed a couple units here. So the two units that we've decided to change in the T2 bot lab for Armada are your Hound and Recluse. So we've made Hounds into more of a bit of what we call an aggressive skirmisher. So they do have slightly less range, but they also have really strong speed, and they're quite a bit more accurate. So they're strong skirmishers, and you can see comparing them, they actually are outranged by rocket bots, but they're much, much faster. Almost, not quite, but almost double the speed. Oh no, literally double the speed right now, actually. So this is kind of how we're looking to give T1 and T2 interaction, right? And then for the Spiders, the Recluse, we made these into a mobile agile artillery. So they have 775 range now, but they're quite a bit slower, and they are very fragile. They have really low health. Same with rocket bots too. Finally, in the T3 bot lab for Armada, we have changed Marauders to be a bit more of a T3 Raider, so they have higher damage, but less range, and a little less health. And this is to compensate for them coming out of a cheaper lab. We've also made the Jammer for T3. The mobile Jammer is also a mobile radar, or it should be a mobile radar, as you can see. T3 mobile radar. So these are the few change units for the Armada bot lab. Of course, we will be looking for future changes. There's some units that might feel underwhelming at first, and we really would like your feedback to figure out what changes to include next to make sure that the Armada bot tech tree feels good. All right, so here we are with the Armada vehicle tech tree. In the basic vehicle plant, the roster itself doesn't really look different, but shell shockers are even stronger as artillery now, although they're also even less effective against units. But we have given them pretty good range at 830 range, making them into true artillery regardless of tier. They outrange all like T2 and even T3 skirmishers, etc. But they're very immobile, and they have to be pointing forward to fire. So as soon as units start rushing them and they have to retreat, they lose their value. They really are a unit designed to be good against static defenses and bad against units. And that's actually it for the T1 Armada vehicle plant. The T2 vehicle lab, however, we have obviously included hovers here. We haven't included any changes for hovers yet, but we do anticipate that hovers will need buffs, reworks, or something to make them feel T2. But for now, we've just focused on non-hovercraft units. The units that have been changed in this lab, first, your Mauser is now also more of your an even stronger artillery unit, but it is artillery, so it has to be pointing forward. It has a more restrictive firing angle, so instead of 180 degrees, it's 120, similar to shell shockers. It's also immobile, and it has amazing range, 1050 range. But it's indirect fire, so similar idea of it is really not a unit that you're going to be reaching for to deal with mobile units. It's very good against static, very bad against units, and if you have to retreat with them, you can't kite with them, they just lose their value basically. Also, turtles, we've given a little bit of a buff to make them more of a main battle tank. They have a bit more damage, good range. They're just kind of a good all-around unit. Obviously, they're still amphibious. This is kind of your frontline vehicle from this lab. Also, I guess the construction hovercraft is good to cover. It's essentially a mixture of an amphibious and land con. A sea and land con, so you have both of those options there. Nothing too fancy there. Good speed though for a constructor, so that's in this lab. In the advanced vehicle plant. And then in the experimental vehicle plant for Armada, we have bulls, which have been changed a little bit to also make them more of your like main battle tank. They're good at skirmishing, good for assault. They have pretty good damage, good AoE. Yeah, not much else to say there. Kind of have two main battle tanks, one main battle tank per lab. And I guess that's it. You also have your lunkhead here. Oh yeah, sorry. Starlights also do more damage, but they fire even slower. They're also like a very immobile artillery piece, but they are different than other artillery in that they actually are somewhat effective against mobile targets still. They have really good single target damage, so they're almost like a tank hunter. And that's Armada T3 vehicles. That's our Armada vehicle tech tree. And as usual, you have your mobile jammer, which also functions as mobile radar. All right, here's the Cortex bot branch of their tech tree. The T1 bot lab roster is also unchanged, and it has mirrored changes. So thugs are shorter range now. They're faster. They still have really good health. They're kind of like twice as dense. They are more expensive too. They cost double the metal, so 280 metal. Rocket bots are, or the aggravator is 600 range, so a little more range than the Armada rocket bot, and they're very slow, 35 speed. And this is similar ideas, so both of these units are now a little bit better at fighting T2. They aren't invalidated anymore, hopefully, when T2 comes out onto the field. At least that's the idea behind them. And the thug is better at dealing with fast, light groups of units, while the rocket bot, the aggravator, is really good versus static and not quite as good against units. Then in the advanced bot lab, the heavy long range bots have been taken out. So like Mammoth is T3 now. Scuttles are T3 as well. You have the Arbiter. We also made this similar to the Recluse. We made it kind of like a artillery unit that's like almost a skirmisher. It has 900 range, so longer range than the Recluse, but it's actually a little faster than the Recluse too, but it's obviously not all terrain, and it has high trajectory rockets instead of the kind of not flat trajectory that the Recluse has, but more flat trajectory. So that's a key difference there. But for both bot labs, the T2 artillery bot is a little bit faster, more maneuverable, but shorter range than the vehicle artillery counterparts. And you have rockets instead of plasma. We also changed Sheldons. They're now slower, so they're only 47 speed, and their range is about 650, or their range is 650. So they're shorter range. They're still long range, but they're not quite long enough range to be a true artillery like siege unit that can deal with static defenses. Their range, however, is still really strong compared to the rest of the units at their tier. 650 is high range for a skirmisher, and that's essentially what they are. So they're pretty good against slower groups of units, not quite as good against fast groups of units, but you, of course, have sumos and fiends. And so if you can't tell a pattern by now, we've really focused on skirmishing units and artillery units, as well as like main battle tanks in the first test version of this tech split. In your T3 lab, Mammoth and Shiva have been given changes as well. So the Shiva changes were to both of its weapons. It of course has the Shiva missile, which we gave a bit longer range. We also reduced its fire rate. We doubled its fire rate to make it fire half as frequently, and we doubled the damage of the rockets. So the idea behind that is to make it more like a true artillery unit that's doing high single target damage at range. And then we reduce the range of the plasma cannon on the Shiva to make the distinction between the two weapons more obvious. And the plasma cannon range on the Shiva is now 475. So very strong range, not quite good enough range to be in the artillery kind of zone. In fact, worse range than a Sheldon still. But they do have both weapons still. And this was to just make it more consistent with the reduced cost of the T3 lab, since it is in the T3 lab. The Mammoth had a bit of a range increase, and the per shot damage was increased, but the rate of fire was decreased, so it now deals 700 damage per shot, only 350 damage to commanders, but it fires a little less frequently than previous. And it's really like a walking HLT, which I will go over the HLT changes later. But those are the two changed units for the T3 bot lab. And just like the other labs, you have the jammer that also has radar. All right, so here we have the Cortex vehicle branch of their tech tree. In the Cortex T1 vehicle plant, Wolverines are the only different unit, and they have a similar change to Shell Shockers, but they have a little bit more range, slower reload time, and more damage per shot. But similarly, they're very immobile, very fragile, not good against units, but good against static structures. And the rest of the units were unchanged in the Cortex T1 vehicle lab. For T2 vehicles in Cortex, the Banisher and Tiger both received changes, as well as the Quaker. So Quakers have similar changes to Mausers again, but it has higher range and fires slower than Mausers, but deals more damage per shot. And similarly, it's also high trajectory now, and like all artillery, it can only shoot forward in a 120 degree cone. So the artillery can't really retreat, and it can't kite and deal damage. So that's the idea behind that. Then the Tiger has been made into a main battle tank, and it's a fast main battle tank, one of the fastest, and it deals a lot of damage, but it has a very small range of only 305. But you can see it fires pretty fast, and it's very fluid to maneuver around, which tends to be a theme for Cortex's T2 bot lab, because Banishers similarly are now fairly fast. They accelerate a little slowly, but when they're at full speed, they're pretty maneuverable, and they have a much shorter range to make up for it. So they are more of a hit and run skirmisher. They don't even outrange LLTs, but you're able to dip them in and out to fire and retreat. Then in the Cortex T3 vehicle lab, SARs have been given a change to make them stronger because they're T3. And that change is giving them a bit slower rate of fire, but much more damage in a area. So they are more of a true T3 unit now, and they're also different than Shivas because they have more range on their plasma shot and more damage. So then just briefly, I want to touch on the C branch and air branches of the tech tree. We didn't really change any units here yet. We're kind of giving it some room to settle in and see what direction to take it in, if it, with the split. So things are obviously subject to change. It's very experimental. But aircraft have seaplanes as T2 with the heavy transport, and then T3 is just the old T2 air. And C has hovers and some amphibious options in the shipyard, the T2 shipyard. And you have the T3 hover tanks in the T3 shipyard as well. And then also the mobile anti-nuke for both factions now has a little bit of a jammer on them, because the T1 jammer is gonna be your mobile radar for T2 ships. It kind of gives them a little bit of compensation for losing, or for having a little bit more expensive of a T2 shipyard, and this just keeps it more consistent with the base game, but still pretty inexpensive T2. And future changes will of course be explored for C with this combination. There is the C variant of the aircraft plant, and it is built by the T2 construction sub there. And also you have your experimental shipyard, and then from the experimental shipyard there is still the underwater experimental gantry. And of course both factions have the gantries with the regular rosters. And then finally, a few notes. So we've changed 4 defenses, 2 per faction. The HLTs have been made to be more area control, so they have a bit more range. They do a little less damage, but they also have more HP, so they're more sturdy. And then the T1 static artillery is a little lower range. It still has good range, and has a little faster trajectory on their projectiles, but they cost a little less, and because of that they have a little less range, etc. So now the gauntlet, for example, is 800 metal, the agitator's 870 metal, and it's a 1-to-10 metal to energy ratio. And then Overwatch is 535 metal, 5,700 energy, with 750 range, and Wardens also have 750 range but are 580 metal, 570 energy. And the Overwatch costs a little less metal and has equivalent health to the Warden, so you get a little more health for the metal, but as a trade-off it has slightly lower damage. So the Warden, you pay a little extra metal for more damage. A few other things. T2 cons for now have only T1 defenses. This might change though, but just be prepared for that. And nukes and anti-nukes are also T3. I can't think of anything else. So I hope you all have fun testing the tech split out. We really appreciate your feedback. It's obviously in a very early stage right now, so any issues you find, please let us know, and hopefully we can all make the tech split the best it can be and help improve the tech tree and bar.